are going to talk about why relationships matter. And the description behind that, women and men discuss how growing their networks influence their careers and why advocating for talented professional women is important. So we're really going to go down that road very specifically. But before we get into that, I wanted to get a sense of where everybody here considers home. Because I often get asked, so where's home? Who considers South America home? Great. Central America, Latin America? North America? Everybody else from other parts of the world? Great. You're just part of everybody, Bernadette. And we're going to hear your story. So fantastic. We do get a sense. And who considers themselves early on in career? Fantastic, fantastic. Okay, great. So I will start directly next to me. And if you could please do this for me. Give me your bio in one sentence, the official bio thing. Erika first, in a sentence if you can.
Okay, my bio in one sentence.
I mean, is this on? Maybe let's see if this is on for you. There you go.
Okay, can you hear me now? Great. Okay, good morning, everybody, and I'd like to thank you for having me today. My name's Erika Irish Brown, and I am Global Head of Diversity and Inclusion at Bloomberg. Spent the first 15 years of my career as an investment banker, and diversity was my second job, and decided to dedicate my career full-time to diversity about 11 years ago. More than one sentence, sorry.
That worked. A lot of dashes in there. Bernadette, how about you? That worked out really well.
So I feel like this is like a Twitter test. So I
talk in Twitter, by the way, so that is what I do. Yeah.
I'm going to say HBO executive, New Jersey suburban mama of 3.
I like it. Yeah. Well, the favorite word in that was mama, I think. Yeah. Om?
Thank you, and thank you for having me. So my name is Arora, and I'm the head of Latin America for Pfizer's Innovative Health. Been here in the U.S. 20 years, and consider both India and the U.S. as home.
Fantastic. Oh, so now you're sitting having a cocktail, and now you're telling us stuff that you don't want to be on the record. What's your one-liner? And Om, you're going to start. Oh, yeah. So you have a favorite hobby, or what is that?
I brush my teeth in the shower.
You brush your teeth in the shower. That's Twitterable, I think.
Too much information. Sorry. So you can.
I think you did it. No, you got it. You got it. That works. Or if you want to revise later on, I'll give you a second. Bernadette?
Oh, I don't know. I
Come
don't
on.
have one. My life is an open book. People who know me know me. I
Okay,
don't
so
have
that's.
things I say only at cocktails.
Well, that works. No, that works. That works. Erika?
And actually, like Bernadette, I am a suburban Jersey mama of 3 boys.
Oh, wow.
3 girls.
Let's talk. This is how it happens.
That concludes our panel today. Early on matchmaking is what we're doing on this panel. This is great. I don't know if that we did say that's why relationships matter, right? That is what we said.
That's right.
Bernadette, why do relationships matter?
Well, all right, I'm just going to do a preface. One, first of all, that panel earlier was amazing, and I'm always inspired by hearing entrepreneurial women doing what they're doing, creating a culture. I mean, I think it's just amazing. I almost feel like now we're talking about the other side, which is the corporate world and how to navigate. One of the discussions that we all had, which by the way, those breakout sessions are not long enough because I think that's where everybody wants to talk. But the conversation we had out there was about relationships, and I think especially in a corporate sense, so much of corporate world and life is there's nuanced culture, right? Understanding culture, understanding how a company works, and I think more so than I would say anywhere else, navigating culture comes hand in hand with relationships, whether they are relationships with peers, whether they're relationships down the organization to get things done, or whether they're relationships up the organization. It is all about how you navigate and the cues and clues that each of those relationships give you in terms of navigating your own path in your own corporate environment.
Culture.
Culture.
Erika, why do relationships matter?
So from the perspective of your career, I can say as someone who has had 8 jobs in 26 years, that all but one has been a result of a relationship, a former client, a former colleague, a former boss. So relationships certainly matter. If you have a strong brand with the people that you know and work with, and I'm keeping it specifically in the professional realm, in terms of advancing your career. And who knows you better and what you're capable of than the people that you've worked with. And how they regard you is exactly how they market you when a role might come up or when they think they might have something that you're interested in.
Right. And so if you were to break down those relationships that were popping up in your brain as you were talking, how many were men, how many were women?
About 50-50.
About 50-50?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll drill down more on that.
Yeah.
Om, why relationships matter?
So I think as from a career standpoint, as we progress, oftentimes it's the feeling that you've done had these experiences, you've proved that you've done well, and so sometimes people feel like, why am I not progressing? And I think that's table stakes. So you have to do a good job, but the rest of it is exactly what both my co-panelists have said. The rest of it is about relationships, and I don't think you don't complete that circle without the relationships.
So as you try to do that, Om, how do you grow them? It's not like a little garden sitting in the back of your yard or something. You go out and you water relationships. But maybe it is like that. I don't know. How do you grow relationships?
So I think it has to be based on something meaningful, on content. I don't think you can develop relationships without, I fundamentally, the concept of networking, and I was talking to someone about this during the break, the concept of networking, to me, in 5 minutes, you're not going to build something. I don't know how you would, right? It takes time. It is like a garden. You do have to spend that time. You do have to put it in. And you don't leave relationships behind. You have to go back and revisit and make sure to keep those connections open.
You know what I find interesting, though, to the panel here is that in relationships, at least for me being in news, I have maybe 60 to 90 seconds before we go live with all three of you and the cameras are on, and I maybe will have that amount of time to get a sense of who you are. So I think there's also an opportunity, even in these networking situations, to realize you can start something in 90 seconds. I can't tell you what has happened in terms of the charities I become involved in because of those 90 seconds.
I think the key is what you said is start. You can start something, but
yes.
The growth to which your question was, you have to put in the effort.
I'm with you on that. Then you add in the Miracle Grow, you put lots of sunlight and all other stuff. Bernadette, how do you grow relationships? What's been your key approach here?
I mean, I think it's the same thing, right? So you do have to put yourself out there. And actually, you said a great thing that I want to just touch on for those who did raise their hand that said they're earlier in their careers. Table stakes being that you know how to do your job and you know how to do it well. I think the challenge oftentimes, and let's bring it to gender, is that I think a lot of us, and I'm going to put myself in this equation, have grown up definitely with a sense of like you do a good job and you'll get rewarded. Yes. And the challenge back to networking is that if you are only doing your good job and you're only in your office getting whatever it is done,
right.
And you're not, somebody said it earlier, building your brand, intentionalizing getting out there. Trust me, as a mother of three, the last thing I want to do is go to a networking event. I want to go home. But it is about intentionalizing, putting yourselves out there and putting yourselves in situations where you can network, you can meet people.
Putting it on the list.
Absolutely.
Put it on the list.
It is filling your dance card for lunch and deciding that you're gonna take out colleagues. I think it is an intentional piece. It doesn't just come to you, and I actually don't believe that there are people who are just naturally good at it. I think it's just that people are putting the effort. So, my take.
If I could just add a couple of things, it's certainly not the quantity but the quality of the relationships, and to the point about where they might start, but without the follow-up and the ongoing communication, even periodically, then they don't grow into something that's a quality relationship. And the only other thing that you said, Bernadette, that resounded with me was, just that hard work. Nobody knows about your hard work unless you tell them. And you've got to tell enough people so that people that are actually in the room when decisions are being made about your career, or people who are involved with a search or gets an inbound from a search firm about a certain role and says, well, I'm not interested in it, but Bernadette would be great for that. I have to know what Bernadette wants to do next in order to, give that referral to a search firm. So you need for people to know your story and have confidence in telling it.
So as you're building these relationships, y'all are looking for something specific. You just do, subconsciously, right? When I'm interviewing somebody, I have a specific desire, and my specific desired outcome is you're being honest. I don't care whether it's seen as good or bad, I just want you to be honest, that you can let yourself loose in this 3 minutes that we're going to talk. What's the quality you look for as you're making and building these relationships, generally speaking? Because I know it's going to be different, and if you want to give me one or two based on two scenarios, that's good. But what is that driving sort of,
Do you want to start?
Sure. For me, it's authenticity. Like, you have to feel that the person is real, and without, I mean, we all present a certain version of ourselves, but there has to be truth behind that. So for me, it's just this feeling of, okay, does this person mean what they're saying? Are they who they're projecting? And yes, you have the veneer of the interview setting or whatever it might be, but beyond that, getting that feeling of authenticity.
I would say it's the same thing for me. I don't like networking for networking's sake. I actually just, it's like, for me, it's just more relationship building. I want to connect.
Yeah,
I want there to be some genuine sense of connection. Listen, one of the things that I think for a lot of people, it tends to be, for some, it's gender, right? Maybe it's easier for you to connect with another female colleague. For someone else, it might be, racial identity. I think that there are these fundamental connectors, and you just got to figure out what they are for you, where you can feel like immediately in a few seconds, you can kind of get into a deeper level conversation. That's not just, do
you go there?
I'm checking it off.
You know, sometimes you're in that relationship, you're like, well, if I asked that might be a little bit too much. But I might get the answer I want.
I do, because you know what? Right there, by the reaction, whether, frankly, this is worth having another 3-minute conversation or not.
Go for it. Go for it.
Yeah. I think you got to know whether this is someone who genuinely wants to connect with you,
That's
or
right.
someone who's really just checking off the boxes, right?
So, Yep.
Yeah, but you have to be intentional. So, often there is greater comfort in approaching a woman, another black woman. But if you're going to be intentional about building your network, then you have to extend yourself to people that may not naturally gravitate towards, or feel like, oh, I'm definitely going to have something in common with this person. So you do have to put yourself out there in a way that I think most of us are not comfortable with. Even if your Myers-Briggs says you're an extrovert, it's still walking up to a stranger and talking to them and trying to find that common ground to have some type of engaging conversation. But I do think it's important that you're authentic, and I also think it's important that you're not transactional. When people walk up to me for a transaction, that's when the business
You can see it in their eyes, right?
Yeah,
it's just like, I am here to get another business card.
Yeah, and very transactional, and even when they actually want something. Oh, you're at Bloomberg.
Yeah,
you're at such and such.
Right.
And that's not the right way. It's okay to have conversations. It's okay to ask for help or, an in, but how you do that,
switch
and
turns,
at what
right?
point of the relationship, it's probably not in the first 90 seconds.
Yeah.
So I think Erika mentioned something I think really important that I just want to make sure, that kind of speaks to where we were even in the last panel, this notion that, back to building your network, it's important not to build like an echo chamber. Right? Like most of us probably on our Facebook feed, you're probably leaning one side, so you get one side of what's happening in politics. It's the same thing. I think I often find actually a lot of people who, to your point, comfort level, I've created a great network of women. That's fantastic, but it's like you're missing a whole other silo of perspective and input.
Yeah.
And so I think, to your point, that diverse set of people who can candidly and honestly give you opinions about things is equally important. I love my ladies,
right.
but I can think of two men in my life in particular, one of who really prides himself on, being, as he says, I'm an a-hole. But the reason I mentioned
this is live being streamed, by the way.
I got it. It's why I edited the actual word.
Yeah.
But I think what's interesting about that is his brand is he tells it like it is.
Yeah.
not everybody's cup of tea, but you know what? Once in a while, having someone, you may not agree all the time, but someone kind of give you a very differing perspective can be extraordinarily helpful as you're trying to navigate decisions.
And I can't echo what all three of you have really said here is, one of the things that I try to do for myself, and when I'm in these situations where we're sitting on a panel, is list 3 people that you think you would never know or never want to know, 3 people or types of people or regions or whatever it might be, and then go out and meet them. And then create another list of 3, because that's what you're really saying, right? That's where we're able, I think, to understand context. And context gives us so much better understandings in relationships. All right, so I'm going to dive into your big brains here, and I want to know, what is your favorite question to ask when you are out there building relationships? And again, not necessarily in a mechanical way, but it's because you care, right? What's your favorite question that you like to ask? Anybody?
I'll be honest with you, and this goes back to personality, Myers-Briggs or whatever it might be. I definitely gravitate to conversations and get energized by, I'm a fixer. I like fixing, I like connecting. So oftentimes I don't ask the question, but really what I'm looking for when I'm connecting is, how can I help you, right? Is there, what is it that I physically can do after this conversation? I met a young woman outside who is from China and wanted to know things about how we do distribution. To me, I'm always looking for the fantastic. As soon as we're done with this conversation, I'm gonna make sure that I'm connecting you with the right person. And so for me, that's really what I'm looking for in the conversation. It's almost like where you started. If you're not giving me anything about, fundamentally what it is that you're interested in, that I uniquely can help you with, conversations can just be very stale. So that for me is just, I don't ask it, but I think I'm always looking for it. It's how can I get involved in this conversation and be involved in whatever follow-up happens after it.
Right.
I think one of the things I don't do is that, so what do you do? I think that so often people just want to know what people do, and it's so surface level, and it's not about who you are, but what you do.
Right.
And I know many people define themselves by what they do.
Yeah. And then the code words come out, right?
Yeah,
I'm from that part.
But I like to understand who people are first.
Yeah, right.
And then, what they do, what they aspire to do, things of that nature.
That's fun.
Can come more naturally.
Right.
And then you can play the connector role and otherwise. But there's got to be something sort of fundamental about who that person is. What's important to them? What are their core values?
Right.
What brought them to this event today before... it's I'm an investment banker, or I need an intro into XYZ firm. And
right.
So I think that's part of being authentic too, right? In terms of knowing who you are and how to put yourself out there in terms of who you are and what you're about.
Not asking, what do you do?
Yeah.
That's what's your secret question?
So I don't know that there's one question. I think it's more about what Erika was just saying. Is getting to know the person really. And those questions, sometimes for me, it will at some point involve, what do you do? Because, you can find a connection there. And to what you were saying, Richard, I think if there's a lack of connection, I'm also fine just leaving it and not spending those extra 3 minutes. You have to be ready for that. And it's uncomfortable, and I don't want to spend another uncomfortable 3 minutes. So let's just end it right there if you don't find a connection. So for me, it's,
So can I just, because, sorry, now I'm going to hijack your panel.
No, that's you have to, Bernadette. The way it works is we like people who interrupt.
Can I just ask
but
a
are
quick
fast.
question though, because I feel like right now, obviously, we're talking about this very formal notion of networking, but I would at some point like to get really into the informal, right? The what you do every day when you show up to work and you walk down the hallway, and the
what
people
you do every day.
lunch with.
Well, go for it. Have at it.
Because I like I said, to me, it's like there's a prescriptive how to network, which this is. We can do that 101 panel, but I think trying to tie it back to what we heard in the last panel, right? Which is, how do you break through, right? How do women fundamentally in corporate environments where culture and subtlety dominates, how do you create effective relationships? And
What's your
the
answer?
process by doing to
What's
do
your answer?
that. So I was asking. So give me a second.
I thought she was ready to
process
rain it down.
my-
I thought the answer was
I
coming.
just kind of wanted to throw out the topic there because, like I said, it's one thing to do the cocktail networking.
Yeah.
But I think most of us, and I'll put myself in that, right? We're all navigating how to continue to progress in corporations.
Yeah.
In corporations where there are certainly ceilings, in corporations where the people who are above us don't look like us. How do you break through? How do you do that? How do you
To our
enter
panel.
into
Okay.
that conversation?
That's a good question.
So I don't know that it holds. I know I'm surrounded by women, so I'll be careful when I say this. I don't know if it holds only for women, though.
Are you just realizing that?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I'm just realizing that exactly. Thank you,
Absolutely.
Richard. So yeah, I mean, for me, it's the same for me,
Yeah.
right? And I will add the complexity of being a person of color in a largely, Caucasian-dominated field. I have the same question: how do I do this when everyone above me looks different, right? For a different reason.
Yep.
So, what do I do? It comes back to, I think, finding the connection and actually making it meaningful. Whether it is a connection on, I don't play golf, can't be that. I can talk about cricket, I can't talk about football. So there are things that are stereotypically what one would expect to connect with, your superiors at work, and those don't work for me. So I found my own way to connect with them, be it about common interests politically, family, being an immigrant, whatever it might be. And because I can talk about that authentically, I cannot talk about football authentically. So it comes back to authenticity for me.
Erika, what do you think? Building on what Om and as well Bernadette said here about that walking down the hallway, water cooler versus this is a networking event.
So, one of the things, when I walk down the hallway, I speak to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of what I think my signature in the workplace is. From the time I hit the building, from the ladies at the reception desk, the security guards, I speak to everybody.
There's Erika. There she is.
Yeah.
There's
And
Erika.
You, you know when I hit the building.
Yep.
And
Do they sound an alarm?
I think it's important to, one of the things I just personally feel is important is the people that you see every day. Very often people walk right by the people that you see every day.
Yeah.
And I will never be one of those people. So from the time I hit the door, I'm going to say hi to everybody I see every day. And I just start little conversation. One of the advantages working at a company like Bloomberg is that we must wear our IDs, and we have an open work environment.
Is it lapel or here or is it?
No, it's hanging around your neck.
Around your
Matter of
neck,
fact,
okay.
The lanyard is a cultural thing at Bloomberg.
It is, huh?
And we have lanyards for every season, every Heritage Month, so the lanyard is big at Bloomberg. But you wear your ID. So you always know that person's name.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no reason not to say, hey, Richard, how are you today?
Right.
And it's an open work environment, which really does encourage that sort of collaboration and the act of seeing people.
Mm-hmm.
Because people aren't behind closed doors.
Right.
They're right there.
Right.
And I'm not going to walk by people that I walk by every day. Oops, sorry.
Yeah.
And not, speak to them.
Right.
So even it's just the good morning, the good afternoon, have a good night,
Yep.
Do you want me to bring you up? We have this thing at noon where the soup comes out. Do you want me to bring you an extra soup? And half the
Sure.
people I don't really know.
Yeah.
But it's
So
nice.
I love what you said because I'm sure all of us can remember at some point in our career those senior people who at some point saw us. Like they saw us, they acknowledged us. And it's interesting because as you progress in your career, that's exactly right. It's never lose what someone else did for you. And, we talked the first part of this panel, obviously, about what can you do when you're in a networking situation. But all of us have some degree of influence, right? Whatever level you are in the organization, you have a degree of influence and a responsibility. And I think some of it, hand in hand with that, is that we have to have the courage to do for others. I love that story that was in the press recently about the women in the Obama administration and this kind of unspoken, or actually spoken, but just amongst them, kind of strategy that they had when you get in the room, in the situation room, and pressure is on. And of course, people under pressure look at the people who most likely look like them for the answer. And oftentimes feeling that women's voices were sometimes not heard. And they had this thing where if one woman said it, everybody else would kind of support it and repeat it. And to me, that is a perfect example of the types of things that we, all of us, are able and capable of doing for others, right? It's looking at and like you said, it's not just about gender. It's about the junior person in the room. It's a diverse person in the room. It's the person who doesn't have the power in the room. And if you have any inkling of the ability to share power, that is, to me, what we can do in any environment. Like you said, the acknowledgement of, the guy who swipes your ID on the way in. You're in a marketing meeting with an advertising agency and you're kind of all the junior people, but there's someone new to the team who is trying to get their voice out there. To me, that's kind of the piece of the responsibility on our end is having the courage to share, especially when you're in positions of any inkling of power. To me, that is also part of what it is to build effective networks.
If you're being pulled up, you need to pull up. If you're being held up, you need to hold up.
That's right.
I think I'll just add one thing to that. So I agree. I think the onus on people who are further along in our careers is big to be inclusive and to ensure that, like you said, as you get pulled up, you pull up along with you. But on a more practical level, I think one thing that I try and do is remember names, because it's just a small thing, and it really helps. Like whether I'm going to a meeting where I'm meeting new people, I'll have a picture and a name next to it just so that I have a sense of who it is I'm meeting, because that actually matters. And makes a difference.
So some really good stuff so far, and I want to move into some other questions with a relationship to gender, and we don't have much time left, and I do want to get to some Q&As here. How do you talk about gender? And if you could keep your answers, and I know it's all the answers, as tight as we can, because I have a lot of questions about that. Anybody want to start?
I mean, I talk about gender every day. I talk about race every day. It's my job to talk about it and to talk about what that means in terms of whether or not we're talking about executive presence, whether or not we're talking about inclusive leadership, whether we're talking about people who are not sure their voices are being heard. It's what I do every day. I think the one thing I'll say really quickly is very often people don't want to have that conversation and they just want to ignore it. Or it drives me crazy when people say, I don't see color. Of course you do, unless you happen to be colorblind. And it's okay, right? Diversity is about difference. So it's okay to be different, and it's okay to talk about difference. But what's important is that you value that difference, right? And that leaders are inclusive in including individuals of difference. So I think it's a lot of people don't want to talk about it and want to shove it under the rug. And to me, and for what I do every day, that's not the answer.
I mean, I agree. I think you just have to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. It is not, oftentimes, and I often think, sometimes what I hear is very well-meaning folks who don't want to have the conversation, frankly, a lot of times because there's no solution. So it's like, I don't really want to bring it up and talk if I ultimately am going to let people down because I don't really know how to solve it.
Or it's tough.
And sometimes that's okay, right? Sometimes that's part of the conversation. Look, I think the whole national discourse, what's happening, not to bring politics into this, but it's interesting because voices and things that were never proper to say are now okay to say. Conversely, I think it's actually fueled a broader conversation, in particular about gender and women and aggressions and microaggressions. And I think we should be talking about it. Randall Stevenson from AT&T just, there's, his YouTube video went viral of, the head of a company talking about, we've got to get comfortable talking about it. And in his case, it needs to start with the CEO. I think we're at this juncture and this inflection point, frankly, and not just in this country, but I think throughout the world. You know, I run global teams, and similarly, you're seeing this across cultures, where, you know, we need to be able to have the conversations and create forums for the conversations, even if we don't have the solutions just yet.
Yeah, but sometimes there are solutions, right? And sometimes you can say, well, are you saying that this person is, you know, overly aggressive because they're a woman? Would you say that if you know, Bernadette was a guy? And sometimes people, you know, check themselves. So sometimes there is a solution, there is a solve. You can call people out for what they're implying.
How do you call them out?
And you challenge them. You
Yeah.
ask the question. You're direct about it. You
And
know.
actually, so it's so great that you say that, because that reminds me, we think of network, back to where we started, as one way. What can I get out of this conversation, right? As a junior person, as a female, as a Latina, what is it, right? The person on the other side is benefiting. You are bringing perspective. Perhaps their network is not as broad and as diverse.
Right.
And you're absolutely right. Sometimes I am often surprised by how many people, after a conversation where I think, ooh, I think I may have gone too far, say thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, because you know what, I went home, I thought about it. You're right. Maybe I hadn't thought about it that way.
And sometimes when you're in that conversation, you realize that individual that you're speaking with, that is asking for advice or you know, ways to do things better, they're not listening. And then that's when you say, maybe we'll talk in a year when you're ready to listen in a really good way, because we're spending time together right now. Did you have
Yeah,
commentary?
I think it's about intentionality, whether, and I've done this myself, if I see a panel of candidates for an interview and there are no women in it, I will say, have we really gone out and had outreach to see if they're women? If I don't see, you know, it's more difficult to ensure that there's a person of color every time,
Yeah.
just because from a ratio of numbers, at least if you're looking internally. But certainly for women, and we've had panels talking about science, and the recommendations that were coming back to me were like 8 men and 1 woman. I said, no, we need to have 4 and 5 or 5 and 4. And it may feel forced, but it has to be.
Yeah. And I think since we're talking about this, language is so key, right? At least, you know, that's what I think about every day when I'm talking about very controversial issues, the election notwithstanding in the United States right now. But it is, how do you talk about gender? And I think we need to bring in analogies that are not necessarily gender specific, that could be ethnic specific or regional. And when we sort of bring in those sort of stories, then people go, oh, now I know why it's a big deal. Because that's often not said, but you can see it.
Right.
I don't know, that's a big deal. Because I actually, in my work, I see equal numbers of women and men. And no. I mean, let's talk about it in very inclusive and in really intersectional ways. And I think we can talk about gender as well as, you know, other topics that are so sensitive about groups of individuals. Intersectionality is so essential. Bringing that into the conversation, and then calling a spade, like you were talking about the issue of the election, and when you call folks out, you know, when we have an individual using language that supports assault, call it assault. If it is supporting groping, call it groping. Call it exactly what it is. Do not be PC about it, if you will, because you might offend somebody, because it is that serious.
And I think the best and most effective ways I've seen, at least for myself, is don't be confrontational. Try and have a dialogue about it. And if you're getting responses that are preposterous, then question them. Ask why the person thinks that. And whether it's about gender or whatever it might be, like you said, I think you have to put it out there, and it's uncomfortable, but you have to.
I have to ask
and
this
be
one.
careful of coded language.
Yeah,
too,
coded, right,
because
exactly,
people
right.
use coded language all the time, and very often I act like I have no idea. Well, what do you mean by that? You
Right,
know, can you
right.
clarify? Because people try to, you know, veil things in
So, okay, so take the coding of words, and how do we counterbalance mansplaining? How do we counterbalance mansplaining? You know, do we all?
I think you call it for what it is.
Yeah, right. Because it happens in coded ways, is what I'm
Right.
saying. Mansplaining, you're talking in professional environments, and that's probably where you see mansplaining the most, and it's coded. How do you counteract that? What would have been your strategies in the past?
But see, I just think that's why diversity is so important,
Okay.
right? Because if you have a diverse group of people in the room, Because the other thing about mansplaining is that everybody just starts nodding their heads, right? And it all makes sense, right?
Yeah.
You know, so when you have somebody that it doesn't make sense for, or that doesn't see it that way, or might approach things differently, and you don't have that group think on whatever it is that's being explained,
Right.
you know, then you can have the dialogue,
Right.
and you can change the paradigm.
For me, I think marry someone who's really a strong woman. Because my wife will just never let me get away with it.
Because
And I
you've
don't
been
even.
used to wife-splaining.
That's right.
No, and I don't even realize
better
what
for
I'm
it.
doing sometimes, and she will tell me, "Yeah, don't tell me what I just told
Yep,
you."
yep. That's good. That's good. Good on her. Any ideas to counterbalance mansplaining?
I think I go back to that is why it's so important for people to be in the room, because it is about someone else in the room recognizing it for what it is. Whether it's, look, you don't want to be confrontational all the time, but sometimes, again, it's reiterating, well, that's what, you know, Lucy said over here.
Yeah.
Or, you know what, Lucy, that's a great point. I think there are, and that's why I thought the Obama administration women thing was genius.
Yeah.
They kind of had a secret pact where they were like, we're going to support each other and our points of view.
Structurally. It was structurally. It's a part of the process.
Yeah.
So as we think about this topic of mansplaining, do you ever, and gender, do you ever check your gender at the door going into meetings? And can you give me an example when you did in your career where you said, I'm not my gender when I walk into this meeting? Have you ever? Oh, come on. Maybe, no?
You know, I think I've never been able to really hide my gender
Well,
or my race.
yeah, so look, I
I
understand that. I'm not, I'm not making it,
I
but you know what I
think
mean.
there are other
Yeah, no,
dimensions
come on.
of diversity
Yeah, but you know what I mean,
that
yes.
can cover.
Yeah.
You know, the concept of covering is real, and there are lots of things that you can cover. Your gender and your race are two things that are uncoverable, and people respond regardless. So, you know, I think it's a very difficult thing to do. So I remember when I first started on Wall Street as an analyst, and, you know, being one of the boys and not being offended by certain things, and there were certain things you just expected. So yeah, there were certain things you expected at a certain time, you know, almost 30 years ago.
Right.
But I don't even think that environment should exist today. You know, and some of the things that I had to endure, you know, as a woman in a largely male-dominated, you know, trading floor environment. So, you know,
So
I
you
think it's
brought it.
very
You never
difficult.
checked it.
Couldn't.
Never. I couldn't. Well, I mean, yes, I understand that. Yes, I Bernadette.
I don't think it's like you said, I don't think you ever check it. But that said, another side conversation that we had outside, speaking of gorgeous, beautiful, curly hair, which I happen to have. So wouldn't know. And I think we were talking about a very specific incident that I remember very early on in my career, where I wore my hair curly to a meeting with senior executives.
Yep.
And I remember walking in the room and immediately feeling like everybody was just looking at me. And I remember consciously making the decision, never again. And so I think there are aspects of ourselves that we maybe check. Hopefully you're checking them temporarily until you're actually in a position where you can let your curls loose or whatever it might be.
It's a good analogy.
But I think, and I guess this just goes back to culture. And so much of it is, and this is whether you're a woman or a man, I mean, there's so much about it is about kind of adapting and reading the subtext of what a corporate culture is like.
Sure.
And trying to be you, but at the same time trying to be effective. And oftentimes some of the things that we check at the door, and some of them are even personality, right? Aggressiveness versus, I think there's a lot of things that you just are very subtle in terms of reading culture. But yes, going back to that specific example I mentioned to you, that I look back and I hope that there are not young women in a position, especially at my company, who feel that way, because I remember what that was like. And frankly, now in retrospect, I'm like, shame. There's part of me that's like, shame on me for allowing that.
Yeah, I asked this because, you know, I have checked my ethnicity. When I was younger, I'd say, okay, I'm walking there, I'm not going to be Asian American today. I fool them every time. They just don't know it. I fool them every time. Quickly.
Yep, I tried checking it downstairs. They wouldn't.
Yeah. That's two tickets,
Two
not just
tickets,
one. That's
exactly.
two tickets.
No, so in reverse, right? I think for me, the ethnicity part, like you're saying, sometimes you feel like, okay, you're going to be in a situation where you are the minority, so to speak. But in reverse, since this is more about women and gender diversity, I just try and be more sensitive to making sure that the person with the softest voice or the least power, male, female, most junior, whatever it might be, has a chance to speak.
Okay, we have to go quickly here because they're up here with the flyers.
With a cane.
Yeah. So as a champion for he for she, I have to ask this: how do we bring in men to be part of this discussion about gender equality? A quick 30-second tip here, and then we got to run before they get the cane. Who wants to start?
I mean, you should definitely have a male relationship, a mentor. Absolutely. You should definitely make sure that you have reached out and asked somebody for help. Very often we don't want to ask for help. And it's okay to ask somebody for help and help them learn how to be a male advocate.
I completely agree. I mean, I think it's just diversifying your network and making sure that you're not creating the echo chamber. I think it's crucial. Like I said, and I think some of it is just back to calling it what it is, inviting people into the conversation, not assuming that, I'm surrounded by amazingly progressive men.
Yeah.
I oftentimes make the distinction myself that maybe that's not something that we're not going to want to participate in. You know what? I'll give a perfect example. I invited mostly women to come to this, and now I'm like, there you go.
Bernadette.
This would have been an opportunity
That's right.
to invite the men in my life.
That's right. Who's on the margin, right? Who's on the margin?
Just as someone who's had sort of 8 jobs at Pfizer in 12 years, and I've had 6 women bosses in the 8 jobs, I think it's mostly for me about role modeling. As a male in the workplace, role modeling for other people and not tolerating misbehavior in this area on my teams.
Great. 3
we
questions.
love your wife, by the way.
Yes.
I do too.
We just gave her an award, did we not? We gave her an award from this panel. We can get 3 quick questions if anybody has any, and I'll go all the way in the back. Oh, you're going to pick them? Okay. Okay, all the way in the back and right here and in the middle. And we'll do 4 then. Just stand up in the back. I like to start in the back always. Stand up, please. Go to the microphone. Name, organization.
Hi, my name is Daniela Santua. I'm the founder of the Fairy God Sister, a mentoring organization for women. How do you address mentorship and sponsorship in the workplace, specifically around women in leadership? As we know, there aren't that many women in positions of leadership, but for those younger ones who are starting up, how do they go about identifying mentors, advocates, and sponsors in those areas?
Great, thank you so much. We had a question over here in the middle somewhere. Let's go ahead and get that as well. I'm going to take 3 questions and I'll throw it to the panel here, or maybe 4.
Hi, my name is Jasmine Zacharias. I'm from Greenberg Charig. So my question was kind of triggered from what you had said earlier about splitting the service awards to between men and women. Do you think that pushes women up, or do you think that pushes the expectations down for women to actually build them up into more leadership positions?
Thank you so much. We got a question here and right here very quickly.
Good afternoon. Obi Matabuko, also from Greenberg Traurig. Wanted to thank the panel. I think it's really great when you're insightful and give us good tips, but I want to press you a little bit. You talked about celebrating our diversity and our difference. So I want you to be candid. How, as women, do we get past the uncomfortable and try to network with people who are other, whether they are men? Men sometimes network a little differently than women, I'm told, or any other kind of diversity. How do you press through the uncomfortable?
Great, and then right here in front, microphone.
Thank you. Hi, thank you for the panel. It's been great. Quick question, sort of related to the previous question, is what's your opinion on how gender and how being female can act as a strength in creating these relationships? I'd love to hear your perspective, and you too.
Great questions. To our panel, who would like to attack any of those?
I'll start with using your gender as a strength. I think a person that's smiling, a friendly female face is somewhat disarming, right? So people aren't as much, so I think the smile how you talk to people. One of the things that I pretty much can find in common with somebody is, like, you know, if their kid plays sports or something along those lines. So we can talk about, you know, soccer season or something along those lines. So, I mean, you look for what the common is, and often I start again on sort of non-work things. I think it's important to smile. I think it's important, you know, to, I always wear really high heels. That's one of my sources of strength, even in confidence, and even the ability to look people in the eye.
5 or
right?
6s.
So,
Yeah, 5 or 6s, yeah.
You know, because again, you know, when you're looking up at somebody, even if you feel just that much more diminished than when you're looking them in the eye and you sort of feel confident and you have on some great shoes. So, I mean, I use that as part of my strength as well. But I do think kids can be one avenue. Another avenue can be, you know, it can be around career. If you're at a specific forum, you know, or even here, I might say, oh, you know, oh, you're Brazilian. I was just in Brazil last week, and, you know, and then you go from there. So, I mean, you want to try to find that angle to make the conversation easier. And usually you're in a forum of some sort that there's even something you can latch on to. But if not, I try for the kids.
You know, one of the things I'd say is there's a reason why Beyonce has the alter ego of Sasha Fierce. I remember reading an article early on in my career that actually I think fundamentally changed the way that I thought about pushing into the uncomfortable. And it actually, what the article was about somebody who asks, you know, people who are comfortable asking for discounts at stores. Right? And most of us are like, yeah. And you always have that friend that you're like, yeah.
Uh-huh.
But the whole point was that you can translate this idea of when you think of it, of yourself pushing into something that you're very uncomfortable doing, it's tough. When you imagine yourself as someone else that you potentially admire, that you look at and you're like, wow, they do that really well.
Mm-hmm.
What would so-and-so do in this situation, right? I see a closed group of people networking over there. I just walked in. Right now, I just want to turn around and go home. What would, and in my case, I know very specific people I think of that I think, well, what would that person do? You know what that person would do? The person would pick up a glass of wine and kind of go up there and join. And somehow that empowers me. I feel like I'm acting like the other person and it's not really me. And if there's fear of rejection, et cetera. So I find there's applications for that across the board. There's, you know, when you're making a cold business call, I hate that. But imagining what the confidence, what someone with the confidence or the skill set to do that would do, oftentimes, I know it sounds cheesy, but I swear it works. It's an incredible motivator when you're kind of in the alter ego state of, yeah, that's right, I'm the confident networker. I'm gonna walk in and I'm gonna do this for 30 minutes. And then I'm going to get to go back home and do what I normally do. But I find that there are tools like that I think can oftentimes be helpful in moments where you're trying to push into something that's uncomfortable in networking and business, et cetera. So.
Yeah, and it's your job too, right? So when I think about it, it's my job to go up and meet that person, right? You always do what you have to do when it's your job. I'm not at a party. I'm not looking for new friends, right? The social, I'm actually a wallflower socially. But when it's my job to go out and meet you, it's my job to network, it's my job to find...
It's a different Erika.
Yeah.
Different Erika.
I'm doing my job.
You had a question direct to you,
Yes.
if you could answer that. And also talk about, we need to cover mentorship and sponsorship very quickly.
Sure. So I think, you know, the question that was asked about, is it a disservice and are you putting a lower standard by forcing it? So I think the bottom line is what I said earlier. I think the table stakes is you have to be good, right? And then, so for me, in that specific instance that I was talking about, I know there are plenty of women on the science side or who can talk about it, you know, just given what we were trying to have as a discussion. And so when I saw that there wasn't that balance, it was the intentionality to say, you have to think harder about this. Here are 6 names, go and talk to them and see if they want to be on the panel. So I'm not saying that you have to make it happen just because you need, you know, but if it exists and you're not doing it, that's you failed at the first step then, to me. And then the mentorship, so as much as I can, through the Asian network at work, I do take on women mentees. So if I have a choice, I will just take on. And I think, you know, my wife had a panel once on a double whammy, being a woman of color. And so for me, just having seen what she has been through in her career, I just particularly am focus on mentees who are women and of color if possible.
And to all of the questions that were put out there, I mean, I see it as muscle sets, right? And we need to build up this muscle. And the way, because we never know when we're going to have to jump. And that jump is going to be when we do have that environment where we do want to network with somebody, whether it's a water cooler or a business meeting. But we can practice along the way and do other environments, build up the muscle so you're ready and you feel confident. I've been working on it in these other spaces, whether it's mentorship, whether it is networking, whether it is counterbalancing mansplaining, whatever it might be. You can practice in other environments so that when you're in the environment, you got really strong muscles and you can jump. We got to finish, but I want to finish with a lightning round here because we have questions and I only want one-word answers from all of you. One-word answers, okay? And this comes from Twitter, so I'm just going to point to you and you have to answer. Where's your favorite unexpected place for networking?
Vacation.
Vacation.
The company gym.
Just walking down the hallways.
Cards, business cards, a thing of the past, yes or no? Bernadette?
Yes.
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 Quotas in boardrooms for gender, yes or no?
Yes.
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 Mentor. Who was your mentor?
I have several mentors.
Oh, just give me one.
My first mentor was a woman named Sheila Robinson.
Sheila Robinson.
A woman, Shelley Brindle. She was a boss
Shelley
of mine.
Brindle. Fantastic.
Chief Executive Officer Ian Reid.
What do you wear to get people to remember you, You can say heels if you want. That works.
This will be on the same lines of brushing my teeth.
This is not.
Sure,
yeah.
heels.
I won't tell anybody. Go
Okay,
ahead.
honest answer, socks that are kind of different.
Socks. Okay. All right, Bernadette.
I would have said I love shoes, but actually I'm going to go with actually the smile. I tend to really try and amp
Smile.
up the personality.
Got it.
when I'm
Okay, smile.
Big smile, bright colors, and high heel shoes.
Chicken, fish, or meat?
Meat.
meat.
Vegetarian.
Gender equality.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Must have.
Always.
Fantastic. And lastly, relationships in business and women. The topic of our panel. One word. Don't look lost. We've been talking about it for an hour.
Repeat the question. I'm just buying thinking time. Do you want to go first?
Relationships, networking, and women.
Needed.
Must.
Essential.
Must.
Yeah, I was going to say essential. You took it. You took it from me.
Fantastic. And American Society Council of the Americas.
Thank you.
That's a beautiful thing.
You stole mine. Thank you.
Okay. And I'll say awesome. Thank you, all three of you. Thank you.